Hey, welcome. This is RPPR episode 191, Terminator RPGs and Licensed Games. I'm Ross Payton, and with me is a special guest, Jacqueline Brick. Say hello, Jacqueline.
Oh, good Lord. I was not expecting you to be that cheery.
It's my
I'm
announcer
frightened.
voice.
I'm not used to this. Uh-oh.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Terminator role-playing game, which has just come out, at least in PDF form, and licensed role-playing games in general, because I've noticed a trend in some of them, and you know what they get right and what they don't get right. But Jacqueline, but first, I was sort of informed about this topic because of a tweet I saw from Jacqueline. So before we get into that, yeah, tell the audience about you.
I'm Jacqueline Brick. I'm also known as Jax or Jax Romana. I am an analog game designer, editor, writer, creator. I have done almost every game. I've done almost every verb with analog games except for art direction and art. And that's a lie because I have done art direction. I just haven't done art or layout. Mm-hmm. I'm a freelancer for companies like Onyx Path, Genesis of Legend, Ulysses Spele, Helmgast AB, etc. I also write and design LARPs, and I am really happy to be here.
Yeah. I've Caleb actually met you. I think.
Mm-hmm.
What was the game design con?
Metatopia.
Yeah, Metatopia. And he says hi, by the way.
Yay! Caleb and I are pals.
Yeah. And I've wanted to, and I've you're one of those RPG designers that I've wanted to have on the show at one point or the other.
Thank you.
It's just scheduling and time and energy are harsh overlord of our lives, but the stars have aligned, and it was all because of this tweet thread you did on the Twitter about Terminator. And you
could say no fate but what we make about me getting on the show.
Hey, yeah, it was destined. You started by just talking, sharing some screenshots of it, and just sort of jumped out at me that one, it was kind of tone deaf, and two, it was just seemed. You think for a major license like the Terminator, they would just, I don't know, do better. Yeah, so first, I guess, talk about, like, why, because you backed the Kickstarter, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah, and so why did you, because I'm very cynical about licensed games at this point. We previously done an episode of the Witcher RPG, and that was sort of my, like, and I've seen, we'll get into that in more detail in a little bit, but I just kind of, like, I saw the Kickstarter's like, there's no way that'll be worth getting. But you braved that and went in. What were your impressions of the game after you actually finally got it? I mean, well, actually, first you kind of mentioned that it changed from an earlier version in your tweet thread, I believe. So what was the earlier version like?
So let's start back a little bit. Your first question is why did you back the Kickstarter? Yeah. So here's my secret nerd shame, is that I hadn't actually seen the Terminator or Alien movies until 2020. I was very into it, and my ADHD was like hyper focused. I got hyper focus on this and squeeze all of the dopamine I can out of it. And as I was hyper focusing on this, I saw Nightfall Games' announcement of their Terminator RPG, and I went, wow, this is really well timed. I'm going to back it. And I did. And I'm like, it'll hopefully be good. And then I saw their Kickstarter image, which is an image of a blonde, strapping, middle-aged blonde man who I assume is supposed to be John Connor, smiling and clenching a cigar in his teeth and directing his confused and frightened soldiers into battle, I guess. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem very thematically appropriate.
Yeah, they look really like one. Yeah, looking at this image, we'll use this as the the image for this episode. There's one guy who looks very scared, and the other two are very confused. And yeah, you think it looks like they've already killed the Terminator. You think they would know what they were doing at this point?
Yeah, you'd think. But as we'll find out later, seeing a Terminator is the scariest thing that can happen to you.
Oh, God.
I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I backed the Kickstarter, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, all right, well, this seems fine. I guess it's mostly men writing it. I've actually worked with one of the writers, Judy Reed, on other things, and her writing is actually quite good. So I'm just blaming everything I like on Judy, and we're gonna keep going from there. I don't know, like as the Kickstarter updates kept going, I for a long time I'd forgotten that I backed it, and then the alpha came out. The art's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
The art is good. I like the art. It probably helps that they were able to license a lot of the images from Studio Canal. The art's really nice. Yep.
I think we can safely establish that the art is indeed nice.
I spent a solid day just listing my grievances with this game. I was so angry. And then it was pointed, because originally I was like, oh, the art and layout is nice. And then my friends who do layout pointed out to me the ever-shifting A's, which we will talk about.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't unsee it. And I kept trying to point it out to the designer, because they had like a, hey, if you catch anything that is a typo or doesn't really, or like the incorrect word or whatever, send it to this email address. No, we're not taking world revisions. And I couldn't help myself, because one of the key ways you can tell that somebody didn't actually understand one of the fundamental points of Terminator and Terminator 2 is if they call Kyle Reese stoic.
Yeah, he's pretty tortured.
He's pretty emotional.
Yeah,
he spends most of the movie yelling.
Yeah.
And people are like, he's so stoic and reserved. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he fell in love with a photograph and dedicated his life for that. Like, that's not really stoicism per se. Like, it is.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Also, like, I dare anyone who thinks he's stoic to watch the scene where he tenderly clenches Sarah Connor's Polaroid in his teeth as he goes to fight a Terminator in his flashback. Oh, yeah, that's so stoic. Like, he clearly doesn't have any feelings. He's just a man who gets the job done. Like, what? Fun trivia note, though. That Terminator is the only T-800 in the series who is not played by Arnold.
Oh, yeah. And they have art of him in the book to commemorate it as. That's a good point. I never really thought about that because and the book does show a lot of T-800s, including a whole factory of Terminators and matching purple T-shirts, some with vests. Yeah, a lot of this game does show I think probably where I start is like the company that makes it, a Nightfall game. They created a pretty well-known RPG called Slay Industries, which was also kickstarted not too long ago. They use that system for it, the S5S system for Terminator. If I had to sort of summarize what I thought of this RPG, it's like taking a Slay Industry-sized peg and hammering it in a Terminator-shaped hole. Like it's not the best fit.
Slay Industries is a really interesting game too, because it's like this weird interplanetary cyberpunk thing with alien races and a certain amount of psychic energy and magic, I guess. Like I played it for a live stream for a while, and God bless the GM, because he gave us macros to do the rolls, because otherwise I don't think I could have figured out the rolls.
Yeah, to briefly explain, the core mechanic is you roll pool of d10s. One is called the success die, and it has to be visually distinct from the other dice. And then you roll a variable number of skill dice, and then you add your stat plus your skill to each d10. But you only look at like the if your difficulty's 8 and you have a +5 between your a 2 attribute and a 3 skill, then you would add +5 to each roll, and then so you look at your d10, your success die, add the +5, and if it's equal to the target number, like a challenging task is DC 8, then you need a 3 or better on that individual die to succeed, and then all the other dice, if they succeed, you succeed better. But
now, if you get 4 or more successes on not the success die, you also succeed.
Oh, okay. I missed that part, but yeah.
So, like, there is a mulligan option if you don't succeed on the success die.
Okay, but you have to have at least 4.
I think so. Yeah, it's like 3 or 4.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and the number of skill dice you have is based on your skill. Which so if you have a low skill, you really do need that success dice. So
Yeah,
it's a bit complex.
It's a weird overcomplication, and it's not my favorite.
So I can understand using visually distinct dice in games. Red Market's a game I really like. He does that, but like, but I don't think that works with the Terminator. I mean, so it's not a great mechanic for this system because I think it's a very the rules themselves are very crunchy. There's a lot of space devoted to combat and hacking and very mechanical and vehicle chase rules, and it looks very complex and very bogged down with like special rules for crouching and aiming and like engine.
It feels kind of like they wanted to design a video game rather than a tabletop game. Like a lot of this feels like stuff that should just kind of be handled by, again, macros.
Yeah. I mean, it actually, to me, I was thinking of games like Twilight 2000 and these kind of like military, like it's a very like combat in like where combat's going to be the majority of the session and it's going to take a long time to resolve. And that's really not the Terminator is about combat, but like the Terminator mechanically, I mean, if you think about like what characters do, at least in the good Terminator movies, it is a group of people being chased by an unstoppable killer. And until they figure out a way to stop it. And like that, the whole thing is run away, delay it, stun it so you can get away and then figure out something that will finally kill it. As it methodically killing everything and everyone between you and it. This system doesn't really replicate that because Terminators are very tough. Either they're so tough you'll never be able to defeat them unless the GM write scenarios in such a way to give you the rocket launcher or armor-piercing weapons. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what do you consider to be the good Terminator movies? Because I know everyone has a slightly different answer about this.
Oh, the first 2.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you?
The first 2, definitely. I've heard some people say that Dark Fate is a really good movie, and like I'm sure it is because it's got Linda Hamilton and Arnie back, and that's great. But I don't want to see Sarah lose the softness that she fought so hard to regain at the end of 2.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not interested in seeing her turn into an emotionless, hard-drinking, hard-fighting badass.
Yeah. I think the problem... Dark Fate was a competent action movie, but I think the problem is the Terminator franchise is wedded to these legacy characters, the Connors and Arnold, and like, you can't... After Terminator 2, their story is complete. The only way you could tell a Terminator story is to get new characters and like use the same premise or even the same continuity and just say, well, Skynet is destroyed, but guess what? AI research continues, so there's another AI. And
sure,
yeah, like it's just the Connor. You can't do anything else with the Connor. This Terminator 2 ends very decisively. Like anything else is just it can't work. It's just not satisfying. Learn to tell a different story using the same kind of ideas, or get new characters. But they can't learn, and they made 3 movies now, at least trying to.
It was
Terminator 3 for sure.
Yeah, Terminator 3, then Salvation, then Genesis, then Dark Fate.
Oh, so it's 4 movies. Jesus. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. Hey, so here's another Dark Nerd secret. There are pieces of Salvation that I really like. Right? Like, Helena Bonham Carter as Skynet's face was really fun. That was a good choice. I loved that. Marcus, the cyborg, having this weird homoerotic relationship with John Connor to the point where he gives him his heart at the end, literally. Incredible. Stellar. Should have leaned more into that. I like that they took the very subtle Holocaust imagery from the first 2 movies, like the number on the arm, and leaned more into that. I thought that was a really good use of the themes of the series. I also really I hated that John Connor was part of an actual military and wasn't just like a mutual aid organizer who was charismatic, because in my head, the resistance is basically food not bombs, but more. Yeah. Right? My favorite part of Salvation is when they get the signal, and I'm not spoiling anything because it's an old movie. They get the signal that supposedly jams Skynet's control of bots. And John Connor's like, yes, we tried it, it worked. And the fucking the remnants of the world's military and the nuclear sub or whatever, because they only have the one, and for some reason they're all working together, are like, yes, give us the signal, we will broadcast it, and Skynet won't be able to figure out where it's coming from. And John's like, I don't think that's a good idea. They're like, you're just a lowly sergeant, Connor. You don't know what you're talking about. You've been a problem for all these years, and we know what's best. He's like, okay. And then as soon as they broadcast the signal from the sub, Skynet nukes it.
Damn.
Just incredible. Stellar. Not, I think, what the directors were trying to say, but I really appreciate the continuity of ACAB in that scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weirdly enough, my favorite bit of Terminator Salvation is a bit of the soundtrack that was sampled in a drum and bass song I really like. But I do like the idea of like exploring the post-apocalyptic future, the actual war and life struggle of John Connor. But like they should have, like Marcus, they should have merged John Connor and Marcus's character. You know, what if? What if John Connor was a Terminator and then he realizes it, and then
they kind of do that with Genesis, and it sucks.
Yeah. God, I've seen Genesis and I don't even remember what, like, that plot was so incoherent to me. But yeah, and so yeah, the Terminator as a franchise, just like, after 2 great movies, like, they don't know what to do with it. And so I guess it isn't too much of a surprise that the people making the RPG don't know what to do with it, because their idea is, hey, do you want to do the first movie as a scenario? And then a graphic novel as one of the to be fair, they do get in the graphic novels, which they get a lot of the Dark Horse graphic novels go in interesting directions.
Okay, so we're gonna come to my first biggest bone to pick with this RPG. It loves cops. This RPG fucking loves cops. Yeah. I'm trying to find the page.
Oh, about the like sample characters. It's near the beginning. Yeah,
it is. It's in chapter 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. One of my favorite, and I say favorite in heavy scare quotes, page 20, which is chapter 3. There's a section called Era Natives, which are Era Natives are regular people living linear lives in the time period they were born into. First Era Native, officers of the law. I'm just going to read this to you. Police officers likely have local knowledge, firearm skills, and access to further resources. Their weakness can be that they are not trusted by many neighborhood locals and are indeed seen as the enemy. Pooh. The next example. The undesirables. From petty thieves to crime lords, criminals have local connections and weapon skills. Their weakness can be a psychological disconnect with society at large. What the fuck?
Yeah. Just for shits and giggles, sometimes if you're listening to this podcast, maybe look up what director James Cameron had to say about the Terminator making the T-1000 a cop in Terminator 2. Yeah.
Worth noting.
Maybe think about that.
Yeah. Also worth noting about T2, that bar that Arnie gets his clothes at is on the same block as the Rodney King beating. Like, he specifically chose that location. Like, the entire movie is about how the military-industrial complex, and I'm including cops as part of that, will eat everything in pursuit of eating itself.
Yeah, the Terminator films are, like, the good ones at least, are very anti-cop. The cops, at their best, are ignorant and helpless against the actual threat and do nothing to the best cops can be is slow down the Terminator, like, and at worst they can actively impede and endanger everything.
The point of Lieutenant Traxler and his people is to show you just how dangerous the Terminator is, because Terminator starts off as this very standard, like, suspense crime movie, more or less. You know, apart from the actual time travel. You don't know which one is the good guy and which one is the bad guy, and they put in these very comforting, familiar cop characters who die like bitches halfway through the movie. Because the point is, it's not about the cops.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is pretty tone deaf for just understanding your source material. Like, man.
Yeah. It's wild. Mm-hmm. And there are illustrations of cops for some reason, like another NPC page, which is page 23.
Yeah, having them statted out is fine because that would be that's a stock character type that would show up in these kind of things. You know, like if the PCs need to beat up a cop and steal his car, well, you need stats for the cop.
The other issue with the way they stat out the cops is officers of the law directly above undesirables. Like the other NPC types are like civil servant, civilian, scientist, military or private contractor. The way they phrase those two specific categories is so loaded. They could have just said cops or police officers. They could have just said criminals. Mm-hmm. But they say undesirables, officers of the law, and they're one right after the other. There is no reason they had to be right next to each other like that. There was no reason criminals had to be called undesirables, and even then, making it criminals, and I hate using that word, but we're going to continue from that, their whole thing being a psychological disconnect from society. What does that say about your assessment of current society if you think the ones who are disconnected are the criminals?
And that was part of the Twitter thread you had where there's screenshots of this. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really jumped out at me was I forgot the term for it, but there as a game with horror elements, Terminator does have rules for, like, you see something scary, your character can be shocked or stunned or shaken. Yeah, and you can lose willpower, I think, in the games.
Yeah. Let me bring up that table. Hold on 1 second, because I think about that table a lot.
Yeah. So, in Call of Cthulhu, for example, there's a list. There's a table like, this is what seeing dead bodies like. This is what all the way to seeing what Cthulhu is like, and in terms of, like, from the least scary to the most scary. And lots of games have this. Is very common. Makes sense to have that kind of mechanic in a Terminator game. But the way they allocate, the way they arrange from least scary to most scary, it's a bit.
It's certainly a choice. Losing 5 or more hit points in one attack, well, you don't have that many hit points, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Suffering a second wound or reduced attribute, 2 or 3 willpower. It's quite a few, because exposure to a nuclear, biological, or chemical attack only loses you 1 to 2 willpower. But seeing a Terminator always loses you 2 willpower.
That robot's scarier than that nuke that took out Chicago. Like, I don't know if you know that, but because presumably,
Ross, I don't know if you know this, but one of my special interests is nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
and whenever I see nuclear weapons mishandled, I get cranky. No lie, the Terminator series is one of the best strictly fictional handling of nuclear weapons that I have seen in a minute.
Yeah, Sarah Connor's nightmare of a nuclear apocalypse is pretty much like the one of the Hollywood's best single depiction of it. Yeah, and that was just a nightmare.
Granted, her skeleton wouldn't still be there, but basically.
Yeah.
Also, fun trivia fact: did you know that the woman she looks at right before the nuke is played by her twin sister?
I did not know that.
Because it's supposed to be her if she was able to take a different path.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So that's cool.
Yeah, it is. It is cool. And, but on the other hand, watching all life as you know it be destroyed is scary. But have you considered that a big robot guy is way scarier? 50% scarier sometimes.
True.
Yeah.
Very scary. To be fair, I get, like, actual chills whenever the fucking robot skull looks directly at the camera in any Terminator movie. Mm-hmm. Because it's, like, super uncanny valley and weird for me. And I love it because it's a great horror element. But I don't think it would cause me to lose more willpower than seeing a nuke.
The danger of a Terminator is that the Terminator is trying to create the apocalypse. You would think that would be less scary than the actual apocalypse.
You'd think.
But no, the messenger is actually worse the Harbinger is worse than the actual event.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you also posted a screenshot of an excerpt from the hacking rules, and I actually
Oh my god.
I went into the hacking rules more in depth because, as I mentioned, one of the scenarios is the phone book killer, i.e., the events of Terminator 1. And the second one is set in the future, and it's about finding out that one of your fellow Resistance members is actually a secret Terminator, then and one of the options is actually trying to reprogram to hack your Terminator Resistance member buddy so that he can help you. They have a map of the network nodes. So this is the first mistake, which I'm really impressed in a way that a role-playing game in the year of 2022 would include a detailed mini game for hackers.
You have to build your own board game.
It's a board game. Like, I haven't seen this since like Shadowrun and Cyberpunk. Like that's game design from the 80s. Like, they stopped doing that in the 90s. Like, it just, here's 4 pages of very dense rules that are not explained very well. So I tried to look at the network map, the node map of this Terminator that they have in the adventure, and then try to read the rules to figure out how hard it is to hack that Terminator brain, and I couldn't figure it out. Like,
do you know it takes 30 turns to hack a nuke? I found that out from the hacking rules.
Well, that's a lot easier than this, because there's the hacker on one access node or IO port node, and then there's the network security thing on the other end, and you each take an action each turn. But like, it seems that you're trying to get to location C on the map, but location C is right next to your entrance. So it seems like it takes just 2 skill checks to get there. So maybe I think I'm reading it wrong, but like, it's just also like the average difficulty for it was 13. Which is really high. Like,
it's really high.
Like, because remember, like, your average skill and stat, you're only going to be like, it's going to be a D10 plus maybe a 5 or plus 5 or plus 6, really, what you're looking at. So you're looking at like needing an 8 or a 9 or better on a D10 to succeed, and you'd have to make multiple attempts in order to hack at a minimum. Why would they do this? I don't.
You mentioned that I had said there were changes from the alpha, and you were correct. Mm-hmm. They, in fact, changed the 17 pages of hacking rules to 5.
Oh, okay. So
I literally had a software engineer who is currently sitting in the same room as I. Mm-hmm. I am look at this and be like, what do you make of this? And he goes, I don't know.
Now, was that the original 17 pages or the abbreviated 5 pages?
The 17 pages.
Oh, okay. Wow. You would think that 17 pages would have like examples and things to make it clearer and more concise, but
17 pages is not going to be concise no matter what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh my god. The thing I did understand was the input-output node. I understand what that meant.
Yeah, that's where you start.
I got that.
Yeah, that's where you start on your little hacking dungeon crawl subquest.
Play Candyland. It's easier than this.
Yeah. And there's a very, aside from like very detailed rules for everything related to combat and vehicle chases, and obviously 5 pages of hacking, weirdly enough, they do have some like meta narrative rules, like you have will and hope that you can use to modify dice rolls. So, but they're very unnecessarily complicated because you have 3 types of hope: body, brain, and bravado, and it's just like,
why?
Yeah. Just do fate points.
Literally just do fate points. Yeah. Please. I am begging you. So art is nice.
Mm-hmm. The art is nice. One thing I also did look into was the experience points, because this is not a level-based system, and it uses experience points, but you only get, like, it says specifically, each character that took part in the game session typically earns 2 experience points. The director may award an additional experience point per player per session, but is advised to do so sparingly. But then spending experience points, for example, to raise a skill from rank 2 to rank 3, the skills go up to rank 5, by the way, that would cost 8 experience points. So you would need, on average, 4 full game sessions to level up 1 skill.
You know what I'm having flashbacks to while I'm reading this? Cthulhu Tech.
Oh, I never played that.
I did. Mm-hmm. And I'm sad that I did, but also not because I have been idly noodling at a hack of Cthulhu Tech, because there are some ideas in Cthulhu Tech that I really like. I love the whole arcology thing. I love the future war. It's great. Hate the rest of it. But like this constant, oh yeah, it's a hard game, so like you get these skills in the beginning, and then your progression is an absolute crawl, and you have all of these skills that you need to spend these points on.
Exactly. They do have some statted out characters, including Sarah Connor, Kyle Reese, John Connor as an adult. And I just looked.
Kyle Reese is very stoic and very reserved.
But none of them have a skill above 2, by the way. And John Connor, for example, has 22 skills with at least 1 point in them. So, and his leadership, by the way, our leader of humanity has a leadership of 2. But he has a charisma 3 and natural aptitude leadership, the trait, whatever that does.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just...
They stat out Lieutenant Traxler.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why?
Why not?
Who asked for that?
Well, maybe you want to run your own version of the first Terminator movie, and you have like enough players that you need to hand someone control the cop so that they can fight.
I guess.
Yeah. He actually has a higher leadership than John Connor. He has a leadership of 3. Yeah, he has a leadership of 3.
Yeah, apparently Ed Traxler was the savior of humanity all along.
That's why the Terminator killed him. It all makes sense.
Clearly.
Yeah. And the vehicle rule, and they have like a lot of these licensed games has a very large gear section. So
tell us about your favorite vehicle.
My favorite vehicle is the jet ski, because it's in there, and I don't know if you knew this.
The fucking jet ski.
I don't know. The
motorcycle of the seas.
Yeah, that's how they describe it. It's like, well, I guess you're not wrong. It's just a weird way to say it, and
No, you're wrong. You're wrong, and I'm going to say it.
Well, I actually mentioned this to Caleb, and he said, "Well, I really want to see a Terminator get on one and like sink, because like, oh yeah, an 800-pound Terminator would absolutely sink a Sea-Doo. Like,
oh yeah,
they don't have encumbrance things for it. It doesn't have a weight capacity or anything,
which is hilarious. I just really want to see, like, I was talking to one of my partners about this, and he was like, yeah, we should do the scene from the culvert scene from Terminator 2, right? But it's on a river instead. So you've got John Connor and the T-800 on a jet ski. And then you have Robert Patrick, both wonderful actors.
Mm-hmm.
But Robert Patrick first running on water on foot and then stealing just the Ever Given and just chasing them on the Ever Given.
Yeah. The Terminator RPG, it really does feel like they took, and now I haven't read all of Slay Industries. I did look at a quick start guide of it, but it did look like a similar approach of just, we have these rules, we're just going to revise them and just paste them in there. We already have combat rules, so we don't need to change those that much. Now, there are some things I do like in this game. For one thing, they do have a lot of lore for the Terminators, and they have a really good Terminator section listed on the various models, and there's some cool ones. Like, I like I forgot the model number, but there's one Terminator that's actually a network hacker that just kind of hangs out and plugs into telephone poles in order to gain information. What is it? It's called the T-770.
Kind of fun.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's a neat idea. It's actually like its combat stats are worse because it's optimized for hacking and data storage, and so it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I like the idea of there being more specialized Terminators and different types, and like there's Terminator dogs and Terminator rats, and I was like, well, yeah, well, that's fun. And
really like that they included detailed stats for the HKs, because hunter killers are some of my favorite things, because the fucking honk noise they make in the future war, it just rattles my fucking teeth. It's amazing.
Yeah, I do like that, and I feel, I mean, that's sort of the bread and butter, I feel, of like a licensed RPG is to get into the universe more.
Yes.
You know, I mean,
but I think the problem with their universe, and you did mention that they try to get into the universe, is that I think they get very wrong-headedly into the universe. I'm sorry, you were saying something, but I wanted to mention Spetsnaz.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Spetsnaz are here for some fucking reason.
Yeah, and they're very good at killing robots. They're very badass.
Yeah, they apparently have weaponry capable of taking out a Terminator in a single well-placed shot. What?
Which they don't. I don't think they really stat out. They don't really have like stats for Spetsnaz.
I think Spetsnaz is only mentioned in the first chapter and then never again. Like there's one more mention of it somewhere else.
Yeah, because they also do mention that like there's a Russian AI system called Mir.
Yeah, it's Mir.
Yeah, and it's not as well developed, and it's actually plotting against Skynet, which is a real interesting twist. But
they don't do anything with it.
No, it's entirely left. And part of it, like, that's okay, I think, for a role-playing game sometimes, because then it's, here's a cool hook you can use, and you can fill in the blanks from there. But the rest of the game is... that only kind of works if you just throw nothing but plot hooks and keep everything kind of vague. Like, a lot of things are very well developed, and some things are not developed at all. And it would be better if it was all just like, here are things you can do with Terminators, as opposed to, this is the exact...
It's very weird because they get very deep into certain things, and then sometimes they're just like, Spetsnaz is here, and still together.
And they mention like John Connor wants to recruit them. I feel like in some ways all licensed games, now that I just realized this, probably like the gold standard for a licensed RPG now would be actually looking at the old West End Star Wars RPGs, because those came out in the early 80s, started coming out in the early 80s. They were written before there were... before there's Wikipedia, before there were universe guides. What happened is when Lucasfilm started licensing out people to make comics and graphic novels and books, they handed them the West End games. And so the people, because Star Wars only had the 3 films at that point, and so they became the extended universe. I wonder if like people making licensed games now would be like, aha, we could be the Star Wars, we could be the extended universe for this franchise if we write it. Or do licensees not allow them to be like, you have to go, we have all this other material, you have to follow that, this is canon, this is not canon. I think with the old West End games, they just let them do whatever they want. It's like, yeah, that looks like Star Wars, sure, why not? That was sort of a tangent.
Come to page 15 with me.
All right, the Future War 2.0.
Yes, scroll on down to the Burning Earth, and if you would be so kind as to read the first entry in your announcer voice, because I think that will really capture how I feel about it.
The 2037 to 2039?
Yes.
The Resistance develops a genetically modified flesh-eating virus that targets vat-grown flesh only. The damage caused by the virus overloads and confuses cybernetic synapses. Hundreds of Terminator infiltrators are compromised and exposed. Having lost nearly all of its rebuilt network system, Skynet 2.0 begins raiding former human military installations worldwide, stockpiling the Earth's remaining nuclear arsenal as a last resort.
It just... Ross.
Yeah.
Ross, they decide to take out robots. With a virus. Ross.
Well, I mean, that
not a computer virus.
Well,
a flesh-eating virus.
Well, they do expose hundreds of Terminator infiltrators.
I'm sure they do. What happens then?
I don't know. They probably are just fine because there's still robots underneath. So
I guess it says they overload cybernetic synapses, but it doesn't say what that means. That is one of the things I cannot get over. Like the alpha version had a sidebar, which I believe they've removed because I haven't been able to find it. Oh no, I am so sorry. I found it, and I'm upset. There's a sidebar that says, "What is it to be human?"
Oh, yeah, I see it.
This is page 17, and I'm going to read it to you in my announcer voice. At its heart, the Terminator is a cautionary tale of technophobia. Its villain is an artificial intelligence who, rightly or wrongly, is blamed for the destruction of the world. Distinguishing the difference between human and machine is a common theme. When Reese says, "I feel pain," it doesn't. This is a clear line in the sand separating the biological from the mechanical, a line that even Skynet recognizes and incorporates into its strategy. So, how is the machine different from a person? Skynet is not self-aggrandizing. It doesn't have wants or desires. It knows only logic. It does not show a mercy or remorse. If a problem is encountered, it is systematically eliminated. Skynet is not mortal. It has no shelf life. Time is relative, and all solutions are viable, save self-destruction. It will survive at all costs, and to survive, humanity must die. Show me on the page where I asked. This is not a sidebar about what it means to be human. This sidebar reads like it was written from the perspective of Skynet.
Yeah, it's also not like Terminator is not a cautionary tale of technophobia, technophilia maybe, but it's like the villain is humanity because we made the AI. You know, it's us. It's what we're doing to ourselves. Like, once again, the villain is the military-industrial complex, which will eat everything in its path before eating itself. Yeah.
And like, this is so. Side note: I used to date members of this Silicon Valley philosophy cult called Less Wrong. Look it up or don't if you don't want to take the sanity damage. But it sounds exactly like these fuckers.
Yeah,
because those are the people who came up with Rocco's Basilisk.
Yep.
Right? And the fact that the people writing this seem to have the same opinion on Skynet, which is not that Skynet is, you know, petty or frightened, which it is. It literally sends a robot back in time to kill the mother of the person who could take it down, instead of just taking him down. Well, Skynet is a petty bully. Skynet is the guy who got into West Point because his father was a 2-star general.
It is the machine, but we are the machine.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm really mad that they kept this in here, because this is actually one of my least favorite parts of the game, because it's just nonsense.
Yeah, it's not well written.
No, at all. And so, like, then combining that with the Spetsnaz and the flesh-eating, they're trying to make something cool, but they don't have a clear defining vision of what cool is, and they either don't understand or don't care about the themes of the Terminator movies.
I just don't think they understand it. They at least on a deep thematic level, like I think this is primarily they had an existing game, Slay Industries, and they wanted to just get a Terminator game done using that system, and they made Terminator like Slay Industries.
And that's where it suffers really hard, because part of Slay Industries is cruelty of humans to other humans, right? It's this very grimdark world where people are constantly crushing each other into the dirt. The problem with attempting to smash that at high speed into Terminator is that Terminator is ultimately a story of mutual aid and, like, human empathy.
Terminator is a great film in that you can have multiple valid interpretations of it. You know, it's the power of love, about destiny versus free will.
But the thing that always stays the same, right, is that it's humans versus the machines,
right?
And the machines are the worst impulses of humanity. And here, for some reason, they just throw in colorful warlords a la Mad Max.
Yeah, having warlords and I mean, they're kind of hinted at in Terminator Salvation now that I think about it, but like, yeah, it's very dumb. They also mention collaborators and like human collaborators with Skynet, which has never been a thing in any of the Terminator.
I mean, the collaborators I can kind of see because of the whole, imperialist military-industrial complex thing. The warlords?
Yeah. So the thing is, they don't. It doesn't seem Nightfall Games doesn't really understand the Terminator. This is something that I've seen myself, and I'm sure you've seen as well in multiple like recent licensed games. We did an episode a couple of years ago about the Witcher RPG and how they try to like copy mechanics from the video game directly into a tabletop game. Like crafting, you need 5 of these items and 6 of these items, you make a skill check and you've made this suit of armor, which is not, not a good way to translate crafting mechanics in a tabletop game.
No.
And they had the cyberpunk system, and they forced Witcher into that cyberpunk system because it's essentially a modification of the cyberpunk system. Recently I looked at the Fallout Quick Start Guide, and it's like, hey, you like all those attributes from the Fallout system. how about we just do that, except now it's in tabletop, in our 2D20 system. So we're going to take this 2D20 engine that Modifius uses for everything, and we're going to, shove Fallout into that hole. Like, we're... now that I think about it, they did the same thing for Star Trek, also with the 2D20 system. It's very disappointing to see, like, to have this cool license and you just make the most safe, conservative, traditional RPG you can using a system that is sort of okay, I guess. It's nothing really great. It's just a generic kind of RPG system.
The thing about Slay Industries is it's not particularly a generic RPG system. It's supposed to do a thing, but the problem is they're trying to make Terminator also do that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it doesn't.
I think that's sort of like, for me, when I think of the Terminator, I could think of a dozen different types of really cool, fun, interesting role-playing games you could do.
What are some of yours?
Well, I think it was, for me, the most obvious thing, based on my experience, would actually be to take the Blades in the Dark system, Forge in the Dark. And, you have a group of characters, and then you have a central group sheet. And usually, like in Blades in the Dark, it's your crew. In Scum and Villainy, it's your spaceship. It's some asset. It's something you all have in common. But obviously, in Terminator, you don't have that. What you do have is the Terminator. So you have a Terminator, and the whole campaign is, in Blades in the Dark, you do a heist. And the whole system is designed around heists and scores. In this one, it's encounters with the Terminator. How do you escape or evade, or what price do you have to pay to get away from the Terminator this time? And what did you get from it? Like, the whole idea is you gradually fill in your Terminator sheet to find out what its abilities and weaknesses are. And then at the end of the campaign, you finally built up enough, and you have a final confrontation, and then you find out if you're going to live or die. Killing, because it won't be allowed to kill you. It can wound, until the very end. So to keep, the campaign going. I think that would be interesting mechanically, because tabletop role-playing games don't do confrontations between, like, multiple confrontations with a single powerful adversary. They don't, like, tabletop RPGs are very much like, you go through this group or you go through this bad guy and then you move on to the next, monster of the week. You don't face the same nemesis over and over again. And I think that would be the way I would try to adapt it, because this is all about the same nemesis, and you get really gotta stop this Terminator eventually. But yeah, so that would be my obvious, and I think that would be a commercially viable game. But that would be my first inclination. I can think of other games, but I'm really curious about what your top adaptation would be.
Actually pick Belonging Outside Belonging, the token-based system for Dream Askew and Dream Apart, because everybody has their character, but everybody also has a piece of the world that they control, right? So, like, in Dream Askew, it's like, some of the stuff you can control is polite society and other gangs and the psychic maelstrom. I think in Terminator, it would be really, really fun to have, like, I don't know, another Resistance Enclave, or Skynet, or maybe even a series of rogue bots, something like that.
Yeah, I think it would also be, I think if you could figure out a way to do it for not just temporal things, like someone has, like, aspects of the future and someone has aspects of the past or the present,
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd also really like to play a specifically future Terminator game with either Dread or 10 Candles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be really good. I mean, you just straight up do Dread.
Yeah.
That way, you wouldn't have to adapt anything, because that would map onto it pretty well. 10 Candles, I haven't played. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't played it. But
it's very good. You should play it.
No, it's on my games I will eventually play. I want to play. The only thing I think you would have to modify is a little bit about the ending, because in Terminator, the idea is at least somebody gets to live and see the Terminator dead. Like in 10 Candles, everybody dies at the end, right? Yeah.
But you could do, almost to reference a Star Wars movie that one of my partners has been trying to get me to watch, even though I don't particularly care about Star Wars. I know. But you could almost kind of do like a Rogue One thing. Like, you have to get something to John Connor.
Yeah. I could do, and like, there's a lot of different ways to do Terminator, like, not just that too. Like, I really do like like a prequel or a side game for 10 Candles with a Terminator. That would be cool. Another would actually make it an investigative, like a Trail of Cthulhu, or call, sort of like you're picking up the trail of the phone book killer and you're piecing the puzzle together and sort of tell a side story about what happened. Like how did the Terminator arm get from I mean, that's kind of the Rogue One thing too, isn't it? Like how did the Terminator arm get to Cyberdyne Systems? You could do a really cool feng shui hack to focus on the action. There's a lot of different ways to cover Terminator. Now, there are some RPGs that get licensed or that have good licensed games out of them. I can think of a few, but they're old. Do you have any licensed games that you like?
I don't know.
One would hope that the Avatar game is. I know that's obviously the biggest.
I've heard a lot of really good things about that so far. I don't know much about Avatar: The Last Airbender, so I can't speak to that. But I've heard a lot of good things about the crew developing it. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, and also the fact that they use Powered by the Apocalypse, I think, is a good fit for that.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, Powered by the Apocalypse is pretty good for any sort of.
I mean, there are things it really doesn't work for. I don't think I'd use Powered by the Apocalypse for Terminator, for example.
I could see it working. It wouldn't be very inspired though. Like it would.
No.
It would be this, but actually, it would still be better than the one we have because at least the rules would be concise and like fairly, easy to understand. And hacking would be a single, role instead of a whole mini game. Actually, you know what? I could see a really cool hacking focused Terminator RPG where you're all hackers, trying to.
Yeah, but you have to have at least you have to have at least one Game Boy.
Yeah. But do a storytelling focused game about being the hackers who reprogrammed the Terminator. And so that
could be fun. Because
then you could what kind of Terminator do you eventually reprogram? And is it one that can learn to be human, like in Terminator 2? Does it misfire? Does it backfire and doom humanity? So that could be a really good puzzle. You can make it really puzzle focused, or you can make it like a board game, or you can make it storytelling and just focus on vignettes and what kind of memories you give it, or what kind of personality you give it.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's probably the nature of just licensing. They require it to make a certain amount of money, and it's only companies with a certain kind of track record of production and getting things out on time. At least it's a standalone system. I have to give them that because at least it's not like a 5e compatible Hellboy.
Oh my god. Put a pin in that because I have a rant about that.
Oh no, please! Because so for the listeners who aren't aware, there was a Hellboy role playing game that's kickstarted, but it was powered by 5th edition. So
the number of people I've seen who are sort of new to the design space and say their game is system agnostic, and what they mean is it works in either Pathfinder or D&D is far too many. And my running joke with that is, yes, the two genders. Or, you get Starfinder in there too, if you want to make things really spicy.
Well, I mean, I know some of my friends do joke about Powered by the Apocalypse taking over. And certainly a couple of years ago that was true, but I
mean, Powered by the Apocalypse took over from Fate, which took over from GURPS. Yeah. So, nah.
Well, no, because GURPS has never had an open license. I mean,
speaking of GURPS, though, the Discworld, I've heard the Discworld GURPS game is very good.
Oh, yeah. I think, GURPS does have a lot of licensed setting books, and I think they were pretty good. I don't know if they do much anymore, but GURPS had a pretty good quality control for most of their books.
Speaking of GURPS... If I wanted to play a Terminator game and I wanted to make it crunchy, I would simply use GURPS Reign of Steel.
Oh, yeah.
So it's out of print currently, but it's pretty easy to find if you're sailing the 7 seas. Wink wonk.
Right. Well, I think the PDF is available too. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually have a physical copy as well as a PDF copy.
It's available on the Steve Jackson Games website. As the
okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
I also know that they put out a zine recently to update it for the new edition, which is really cool because I'm a sucker for anything that has a zine.
Ironically enough, when I did try to run a game in Fallout, I used GURPS for it, and then that campaign fell apart for scheduling reasons, which Made me mad because I learned the mass combat rules for GURPS.
Yeah.
And then nobody wanted to also learn them.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
My husband occasionally refers to GURPS as the third best system for any game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because the thing it's trying to do is beat every game at once, which makes it okay.
Yeah.
Reign of Steel is kind of my problematic fave because it's attempting to be an international setting with 18 different, it's like 18 to 22 different AIs, all of which have their own personality, all of which are bickering. So if you can imagine 18 to 22 different Skynets fighting over the remnants of the Earth and also the moon. It's pretty great, but it's also like weirdly racist in parts because it's mostly written by one white guy. But it's fun. It's got the heart that I feel the Terminator RPG lacks. Like, the writer is very interested in what he's doing.
And I think that's the nature, the real danger, I guess the difficulty of adapting an existing intellectual property to a role-playing game. You know, Terminator was written to be a movie, and then there was a sequel, and then maybe some other movies. We don't talk about that.
Right.
But they were, first and foremost, everything about them was designed to make that movie better. Tabletop role-playing games don't, like, you're only supposed to write half the narrative, so the individual groups can fill it in. And so Reign of Steel, I imagine, describes a lot of stuff and doesn't have any resolution because that's up to you. And so, maybe that would be another way of doing the Terminator as a role-playing game, is like, do a quick thing like, why is a Terminator trying to kill you? Okay.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to save them? Okay. What are your special abilities? You know, and then go. And then kind of work it from there. I guess that would be the Blades in the Dark thing.
Or Dread.
Yeah. Or Dread is just kind of ask some questions and get the ball rolling. And
I love that Dread's character creation mechanic is literally just a personality quiz.
Yeah.
It is my favorite thing about that game.
And I mean, that's the thing, is like the in the Nightfall Terminator game, like every Terminator has detailed stats, including how much armor it has, how many hit points it has. And you don't really need, like, if you want to emulate the feeling of being in a Terminator movie, you don't have that stuff. It's just, you shoot at it and maybe it slows down for a bit until you figure out the secret weakness to kill it, you know, whether it's machinery at a factory that you can activate, or like a steel foundry, or some unstoppable force that even the Terminator can't overcome.
As we're talking about this, you know what the Terminator RPG feels like to me? It feels like that DM who insists that every game they have to get one over on their players.
Yeah.
Right? It's that guy who views his relationship with the players as adversarial, both in game and out of game, and just has to prove how much better they are than the players. Because if you look at how they write about the machines, and honestly about authority in general in that game, it's just like, oh wow, they're so cool and they're so complicated, and like they never fuck up, and they're frightening all the, you know, it's not, they mistake power for horror, and it's just not, after a while it's just, okay, yes, I see you have statted out a Terminator on a jet ski. Why is this supposed to frighten me?
No, that's true. And that was kind of like the adversarial DMing was very popular in the 80s and 90s, and this feels like a game straight out of the 80s and 90s. You know, it doesn't feel like it's incorporated any of the lessons we've learned about role-playing game design in the last 20 years. Oof. Well, in the comments, let us know if there are any licensed games that you do like. If you have a copy of the Terminator, let us know what you think. But when we'll be back, we'll have some shout-outs of some things that are actually worth checking out. All right, and we're back. I don't know what music I'm going to put in the segue. I'm sure I'll find something probably synthwave. This sounds like a synthwave kind of episode.
I think you should get Restreams of Future War.
Okay. Is that music is that actual?
I mean, Restreams of Future War is from the Terminator soundtrack.
Okay. Well, I have to get something Creative Commons licensed.
Damn. Okay.
I'll find some synthwave. There's quite a bit of it on Bandcamp. But, we have shoutouts. First one, I would like to... Actually, Jacqueline, do you want to What is your first shout out? What do you like to our listeners to know?
I would love to draw some attention to the solo tabletop RPG God Talker Nobody. You can find it on itch.io. It's by Female Wizards. It is the game that taught me how to write solo RPGs. It's incredible. It is set in a summer in middle America. It can be in the 1950s, I think, is the suggestion, but it can also be modern day. Essentially, you are a middle or working class kid or young adult. Your life is normal, and then you hear the voice of God.
Oh.
So essentially, it's a game about becoming a prophet of a god who maybe no one else knows about. It's really beautiful and lovely. And I would strongly recommend to anybody who is interested in solo RPGs to play God Talker Nobody, because it's free.
Yeah, that is a good enticement. I did have a lot of fun playing 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, so I should probably check out some other solo RPGs.
I've written a couple.
Yeah, we'll of course have a link to your link tree in the show notes, so people can find out see all your works. And we'll probably be reviewing or playing some of them in future episodes. But like my list of games I want to play is very, very long at this point. My first shout out will actually be a movie I saw. It's currently streaming on Shudder. It's called Mad God. It's by Phil Tippett, who is a special effects guy. He worked on Star Wars, Jurassic Park. This movie, it took him about 30 years to make because it's stop motion. He started working on this in like 1987, and he just finished it a few years ago, or maybe like last year. There's some live action in it as well. It is a beautiful movie aesthetically, but it is very surreal. There's kind of a narrative, but it's like there's no spoken dialogue. It opens up with a written quote from Leviticus, the Bible. Like it seems to be an allegory for the divine inferno descending into deeper and darker pits of hell. It certainly looks like it, but it is, if you have Shudder streaming, it's worth checking out because it is very beautiful, and we'll give, certainly if you're running horror role-playing games or anything like that, it'll give you some ideas.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's very neat. What is your second shout out?
My second shout out is Chase the Hollow by Brandon Leon Gambetta. You can also find that on itch. It is a rules light horror game about pursuing an urban legend like Slenderman.
Ooh.
Who is referred to as the Hollow, and all of you have different relationships to it.
Ooh.
For example, maybe you lost someone to the Hollow, or you want to become the Hollow, or you feel like you are destined to be killed or otherwise destroyed by the Hollow.
Have you played it?
I have not gotten a chance to play it yet, but reading through it was incredible, and I really want to try and run it sometime this year.
Yeah, that does intrigue me. I do like a good creepypasta Slenderman-esque kind of vibe.
Yeah. I love that it has that creepypasta feel to it, right? Like that very modern, almost sharp feel of that specific kind of horror.
Like uncertainty, ambiguity, like what is, there's like old horror is all based on rules, like what the werewolf and vampire can or can't do, or it's very totally unknowable, like Lovecraft. This is like, well, maybe you're just hallucinating, maybe it's not even real, or
it's uncertain until it's not, which is the really fun part.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check it out. But speaking of itch, my second shout out is another role playing game on itch that I found through one of the bundles. I forgot which one. It's currently on sale right now as we were talking on June 21st, 2022. But even on full price, it's only $10. It's called FIST, which stands for Freelance Infantry Strike Team. It is a super rules light, powered by the apocalypse, but with OSR aesthetic. But it's basically you're playing paranormal mercenaries. And so think Metal Gear, Hellboy, And let's see, what are some of the other inspirations that they have in the actual game? Basically, you make up a character. The main way you describe your character is to roll on or pick 2 traits, and they have 100 traits possible. Yeah, inspired by the A-Team, Doom Patrol, Metal Gear Solid, Offworlders, Simple World, and World of Dungeons. But these traits are very ambiguous or there's not balance at all. Like, one of them is you're a skeleton. If your body blows up, if someone puts your bones back together again, you come back to life. Or,
so cool.
Yeah, or morbid. You have been touched by death. You can actually make a deal with the Grim Reaper if you or someone else dies. And if you fulfill that deal, you come back to life. But if you fail that deal, you die forever. So characters only have 6 hit points to start with. But you can pick characters that like have crazy abilities. Like one of them is called Henshin, where you can basically be like a Kamen Rider-esque transforming hero.
Okay.
Yeah. Or a cyborg, or you can transplant brains, or you're just really good with a guitar.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, you make your mercenary in a couple minutes and you go out and you fight weird stuff. They just released a campaign set called the Mandelbrot set, which is sort of like Annihilation / Stalker. Like, this zone is full of weird stuff. You need to go to the center of it and shut down the experiment in the fractal zone. And it's like a hex crawl campaign model for it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a really cool. It's super easy to make characters. I'm tempted to come up with like some rules to do like a peasant funnel thing where everyone gets multiple characters. And the idea is to see how many of them actually survive. And that is something I want to check out. So actually, I could combine it with the Fractal Zone campaign. So you go into the zone with like 3 characters, and you can shoot for any given encounter. You can choose how many of your characters you're throwing in there. But like, something I have to think about. But anyways, it's fun, and it's super easy to pick up and teach because it's just powered by the apocalypse. Roll 2d6.
Cool.
Yeah. You had another couple of shout outs. Well,
yes. I'm sorry, I've switched out one of my shout outs. I want to give a shout out to a game more people should play, even though it's a couple years old now. And if you don't play it, at least study it for your game design. Dreaming the Devil by Dimf Nikoi. It is a game about the witch trials in early modern Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a 3-person LARP that takes about an hour to play. The reason I am shouting this game out is because it has the single best torture mechanic in any game I have ever played. And I mention this because I have a degree in international relations, and one of the things I studied a great deal of is human rights abuses. And in a lot of games that have torture as a skill or as an ability, they tend to focus on the actual torture itself. And, it's totally going to get you information, and it's going to, maybe give this person Stockholm Syndrome or whatever. And I find that really gross and misplaced because it never really covers, what happens to the torture survivor or the torturer. But the torture mechanic in Dreaming the Devil is not actually handled by the Inquisitor. It's handled by the person who accused the accused in the first place. So essentially representing the community deciding to torture the person rather than the Inquisitor, because the Inquisitor is just there to, ask the questions and give the whole thing a veneer of legality. Torture in this game, you break a stick. You do not describe what the torture looks like. You do not describe how it affects the person being tortured. The person being tortured has to answer the next couple of questions by the Inquisitor, not truthfully, but in the way they think the Inquisitor wants the questions to be answered.
Yeah, because that's what you do. What I read is I'll do whatever you want. Just stop hurting me. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot because I was in a playtest for this game, and my character was the accuser who had been having extramarital relationships or relations with her cousin, and a priest who was the accused walked in on them. And the priest was trying to explain this to the Inquisitor, and my character, flustered and embarrassed and horrified, broke a stick to get him to stop talking. It is an exploration of what happens when people are not motivated by religious fervor, which I think a lot of people want to attribute the witch trials to, but by very material and social concerns of the time. And I mean, you wrote on Red Markets, you've probably read Caliban and the Witch, about how, most of the witch trials were driven by primitive accumulation and attempting to turn the uterus into a reproductive factory and all this other stuff. And I really like that Dreaming the Devil both takes that and handles torture in a very stark, simple way that doesn't sensationalize it. Anyway, it's on Itch. You should definitely go check it out.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. My next shout out is a lot lighter, but vaguely historical. It is a game I recently played as run by its author, Greg Stolze, Dueling Fops of Windermere, which is a game about it is very much inspired by swashbuckling and that sort of genre, but in a comedic way. Every player is a aristocratic fop who runs a fencing school in the city of Windermere, and plays about a year in their life. And it's sort of it's organized by scene. There's 3 large parties, dances. Well, two large dances, one at the beginning of the game, one in the middle, and then at the end there's a fencing tournament. At the end of the game, you get to see who wins the fencing tournament, and it's very interesting because everyone makes a character. It's a GM-less game, and you basically it plays in some ways a bit like a board game because you basically have very specific turns and actions. Like at the party, what you have a list of you can do these specific actions. You can try and flirt with somebody. You can try and insult somebody. You could have a light duel or a deadly duel, or so on and so forth. All the while, your stats are adjusting after every scene. And if your stats go if your stats go too far in one direction, your character is taken out of the game. Now, you have actually several characters with you. You control multiple characters, not just your fencing master, but they're basically their close entourage. So you can keep playing if you lose your character, but the idea is, you're foppish. Are you a serious aristocrat and a deadly swordsman, or are you a foppish aristocrat? And you go back and forth doing this, and then after the dance, you roll to see what kind of scene it is. It could be another duel. It could be a murder investigation. It could be accusing someone of witchcraft, or making a deal with warlocks. And yeah, it's very fun because it's trying to it's basically simulating the life of these characters and what kind of things they do. And sometimes it's just a comedic, lighthearted game. I quite enjoyed it. It has a lot of Greg Stolze isms, like dueling, opposed stats, that once that gets higher, the contrasting stat gets lower, which has been featured in several of his games, like A Dirty World, Better Angels, Unknown Armies, now that I think about it. So, it's a fun game. It just came out recently. It's a game you can run with zero prep, if you're familiar with the rules. The whole game is 30 pages long. It's only available as a PDF right now. But, it's a fun little game. It doesn't really matter. It's just telling a story about these silly fops and their weird fencing schools. Yeah.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah. There was a lot of romance when I played, and a lot of failed romances, including a failed romantic kidnapping, where one fencing master tried to kidnap my fencing master and tried to woo me, and I wasn't having it, and I snuck out. Quite the scandal. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love weird social games like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something I want to play again too. I'd like to try it with some other players. What everyone else would do because there's 12 types of scenes, and you only play through four. Yeah, you only play through 4 of the scenes in any given playthrough. So there's a lot of scenes left that I haven't tried out. So I'd like to see what those are like. But I think you had another shout out.
Yes, I have one last shout out. Some of your listeners may know that I wrote for Changeling the Lost 2E for Onyx Path, and I talk a lot about my interest in Changeling the Lost. I want to clear up any confusion. This shout out that I'm giving, while I love Changeling the Lost, is not for Changeling the Lost. It is for a game that is just called Changeling. And Changeling is a visual novel by Steamberry Studio about being a girl who is returning to your hometown after several years, and there you had a mysterious disappearance in your childhood, and you returned, and now you have to figure out what to do with that. All of the love interests are some different kind of supernatural. It's very much a zoo sort of game. But the storylines are very good. It follows very Fae themes like illusion and loss and forgiveness very, very well. It's a little game with a lot of heart, and it's a game that made me realize how much I could enjoy otome games or visual novels. So you can pick that one up on itch.2. That's Changeling by Steamberry Studios. If you got the bundle for Racial Justice and Equality, you already have it.
Pretty sure I have that one.
Yeah, definitely check it out if you want to like sort of explore that genre. But yeah, that's my last shout out.
How long did it take you to play through? Do you remember about?
Oh gosh, about an hour maybe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not very familiar with visual novels, but I've heard some can be very long. So, but yeah, cool. Yeah, if it's just an hour, yeah, sounds like a good time. Well, thank you again for jumping on the show, Jacqueline.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Is there any particular project you're working on now that you want to mention or plug?
Yes, actually. So I am very excited to announce that I am working with the crew of the Silt Versus to host a Silt Versus live action online game in November called Project Sparrow. If you're not familiar with the Silt Versus, it is a folk horror audio drama about local gods and their hungers and the humans who have to deal with those. The best way I can describe it is sort of imagine techno-capitalism, but instead of, computers and programmers and stuff, you have these hyper-local gods that are always hungry for specific sacrifices. Your electricity is powered because of a god named the Saint Electric. Your internet is powered by a god named the Wirebitten Child. Maybe the house you live in has a sacrifice slowly smothered in its foundations to the Slag King. And of course, there are licensed and unlicensed gods, and a very human government that decides which one is which. Anyway, the game is a weekend-long game that takes place during the Imago War, which is a sort of World War II-like conflict in the world of the Silt Versus, and you are playing the people who are designing, researching, and deploying propaganda gods.
I'd not thought about the idea of a propaganda god, but yeah.
A propaganda god is kind of a cross between a nuclear weapon and an infectious meme.
Oh, well, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, so you're playing the people who are making it their job to cause those to go.
Oof.
Yeah.
No, that sounds really cool. And that's we'll have a link to that. I guess
so there is currently a Facebook group,
okay.
Which I will give you the link to, and hopefully it'll be below.
Yeah.
We are in the process of finalizing some of the mechanics, and we're hoping to have the character types document out within the month.
Oh, cool.
Which will be like the 7 types of characters you can play. I'm really, really excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah. So sounds very cool. Well, thank you all for listening to this episode. Just remember, there's no fate but what we make. As long as you roll at least an 8. I think that's how that goes. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.